Welcome to a new episode of the Zelestra co-powered podcast. Today we're very lucky to be joined by our CEO Leo Moreno. Leo has been spearheading growth at Zelestra for 2.5 years now. It's fair to say that the company today is very different to the company that Leo joined. We're going to focus today on 2025 and the achievements, and we're going to look ahead to 2026 and what we can expect. Welcome to the podcast, Leo.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm happy to talk about Zelestra today.
So just to start at that point, Leo, tell me about 2025. Give me the highlights, give me a summary. How pleased are you with Zelestra's performance last year?
I think 2025 was the year when we really transformed strategic choices into tangible successes. So we had three major achievements in the year. The first one is that on the customer side, we have a strategy that's really focused on the customer, and we achieved 3 gigawatts of new long-term agreements signed with customers. That is at a very high level that puts Zelestra in really a group of a few companies that are at this volume of growth. With these 3 gigawatts, we're now a company that has 7 gigawatts of contracted projects. And if you go back just in 2023, this number was 1 gigawatt. So we went from 1 to 7 gigawatts in the space of 2.5 years. That's the first. The second thing we achieved is we proved that we could transform Zelestra into a multi-technology company and that this was a competitive advantage. So we did gigawatts of solar, which is our bread and butter, but we also expanded into other technologies. So we signed the very first hybrid solar and storage PPA in the history of Spain. That's a project Trujillo with 200 megawatts of solar and 400 megawatt hours of battery. No one had ever signed a hybrid contract in Spain. We were the first. The second one is we signed a long-term agreement with BKW in Italy for a 2 gigawatt hour project called Massa Fiscalia, which is the largest authorized storage project in Italy. And lastly, we broke ground. We started construction on the first wind project in the history of the company in India. So we went from solar to hybrids with storage to standalone storage to wind. And the third one I'd say is we made a very significant strategic decision to focus on US and Europe going forwards. So we've had tremendous success in Latin America and in India. And we have proven through these past years how Zelestra can create value in these geographies. But now we're at the stage of monetizing on the value that we created in those geographies and really focused on a new Zelestra that will be US and Europe focused going forwards. So these three things really wrap up an amazing year for us.
Well, we can actually pick up on a couple of those topics and explore a bit further. So you mentioned this kind of multi-tech expansion. So this was part of your strategy when you came into Zelestra to have this multi-tech solutions that we can offer to clients so we can offer any kind of complex product that they may need. Now, one of the first contracts that we signed obviously was with Abastible in Chile, so in the Latin American business. And this was one of the largest BESS projects in the whole of Latin America. So tell me about that. If that was the first contract we signed, take us inside those discussions with the customer, learnings you have from that. And then, of course, that opens us up to a whole new kind of level of global supply chain as well when we're speaking to battery storage companies. So tell me about, the lessons learned there.
Yes. So I think we are very differentiated in Zelestra's strategy because we are focused on the customer. So a normal project developer is working on a single project for years, going through licensing, permitting, the project development, the land. And then at one point, the project is ready to build. But the customer may not want exactly that project in that location and that technology. So an asset-focused mentality leaves you for years working on something and you end up with a commodity product. Several other people will have a solar project in that same area. Zelestra, on the other hand, we're focused on the customer. So we start with the customer first. So what are customers looking for in this country, in this market? What kind of energy products, what kind of profiles? And then we're pairing up our project development pipeline to these customer needs. So in the case of Chile Chile is a country where people have built an enormous amount of solar. So the country went from an energy matrix that was very coal heavy 10 years ago to now significant amount of solar. So customers didn't want pure solar. But also the customers don't want just a battery because they want the energy that comes from a project. So in the case of the PPA with Abastible, we designed several iterations of products to fit what the customer would want. And what we ended up with was a nighttime PPA that goes on for 16 hours at night, that has large solar projects, 200 megawatts, but it has an enormous battery, 1,000 megawatt hours of battery. So that allows us to capture the energy, the electrons from the solar project during the day and deliver a nighttime contract that starts at the peak and goes through the night at a flat dispatch profile. So this is very unique. I mean, this is a product that was tailored to these specific customers. And when we design such product, we go back and redesign the project to fit this, the exact amount of storage that we need, the exact amount of solar. So it really connects to what our strategy is of customizing these products to the customer.
And we did, so you mentioned the example in Chile. There's the project that we have in Trujillo that you mentioned as well, that we've signed with EDP in Spain, which is a kind of similar product, but again, very unique profile. This is for solar power with a battery system to guarantee power in non-solar hours. So have you seen a real shift last year in terms of what customers are asking for? You know, is the market completely different now than it was a couple of years ago?
Yes, there's a big shift. And customers, they want different things in different places. And different segments of customers want different things. So in Spain specifically, we went through a period where customers wanted solar PPAs because the energy price in Spain was very high. The energy price during the day was very high, so it was more attractive to customers to contract from solar. But that changed with the large penetration of solar and the drop in power prices. Then the value of the energy in the middle of the day wasn't that attractive anymore. Now, in Spain, quite different than the Chile PPA, the customer that we negotiated with, which was EDP, also wanted energy during the day. They just wanted more energy in the peak. So in the case of the EDP PPA, we negotiated a specific shape of dispatch that they wanted. So they tell us exactly how much energy they want in a different hour of the day, and then we design the project with the right amount of battery to deliver that specific dispatch profile. So it's a highly customized product to the customer, but quite different than the Chile one.
I mean, and you make a very interesting point about the high penetration of solar, and we see that in a lot of markets now. Why, in your view, has BESS technology not rolled out to the scale that it could have? I mean, if you look, so you were delivering projects back in California. You went through you saw the same thing in California many years ago, a high penetration of solar, and they had to bring battery storage on. We've seen it in a lot of markets now. So why hasn't BESS technology taken off quite in the way that many people thought it would have? And what do we need to see for that penetration of BESS to increase?
Yes, I think it's really a matter of the stage of evolution of a specific market. So let's take three markets that were ahead of the curve in this evolution. You have Chile, you have California, and you have Hawaii, which is an island. In all of the three cases, solar penetrated to a level. When solar starts getting to 20 or 30% of the energy matrix, it means that some hours you're going to already have 100% of solar. So if you start adding more solar, you have excess solar power in some hours. So when you get to that level, the only way to continue to add cheap solar power is to add batteries. So those markets went through this cycle more than 10 years ago, and the need for batteries became dramatic. I mean, it was a matter of continuing to keep the lights on to add the batteries so that the solar could be used for the peak hours. Then customers take a long time to adapt to this new reality. I mean, people have to learn how to write these PPAs. People have to discuss internally, understand the operational cycles of batteries, what batteries can do, number of cycles per day, several details about how this actually is done. And what's happening in Europe now is that we got to this point. So we're at a moment where batteries are taking off in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, which are the markets that Zelestra is in. But it takes time for customers to adapt. I mean, we signed the first hybrid PPA in Spain. I expect many other hybrid PPA. We're negotiating more hybrid PPAs. I expect many other companies will sign hybrid PPAs now that this is here. And the same for Italy and the same for Germany. So I think it's a matter of the market evolution first, and then the customer behavior, adapting and learning on how to actually execute.
So, I mean, Italy again. You mentioned at the start that the growth that we saw there, and we have one of the biggest battery energy storage projects in Europe that we are developing in the north of Italy. We've got an offtake agreement already with BKW. They had the Maxi auctions in Italy last year as well, where we saw very low bids. But the market is still evolving for batteries out with that Maxi model. So what's your view on what we delivered in Italy next year, specifically for BESS, and where can we go in the country?
Yeah, so Italy ran the auctions to provide long-term agreements for batteries. But what happens in an auction of this type? Again, it's a commoditized product. So dozens of developers come and bid their energy storage project at the lowest possible price. And they get a fixed capacity price that doesn't depend on the dispatch of the batteries for a very long time, more than 20 years. So this is a non-sophisticated product. So any developer can deliver this. What is the consequence of this? We saw the lowest prices that people could have imagined, because it's an auction and the lowest price wins. So non-sophisticated product, very commoditized, lowest price wins. On the other hand, the Zelestra strategy is focused on a highly sophisticated premium customer product. So the Maxi auction was for projects in the south of Italy, where there's dozens and dozens of developers. The Zelestra project, which is the largest project that's authorized in Italy, is in the north. And in the north, there's much more scarcity. So what we designed was a product with BKW where some characteristics of the dispatch of the battery and of the capabilities of the battery remain with BKW, and others remain with Zelestra, for Zelestra to operate. So Zelestra will bid into a capacity market. Zelestra would get some revenues from the operation of the batteries, and BKW gets some of these attributes. So this is a much more sophisticated product. It's tailored to BKW. This is a 2 gigawatt hour project. BKW took a portion of this offtake. The other portion will go to other customers that we plan to sign soon. So it's a completely different value proposition than the Maxi auction, which is where most of the developers are focused on. And that is the goal of Zelestra in the future, right? Continue to target specific customers with high value add products.
And so then Germany again is the other key market outside of Spain and Italy and Europe for Zelestra. And we signed our first contracts in Italy last year. There's real momentum. So what is your assessment of 2025 for Zelestra in Germany, and how would you like to see that develop?
Yeah, so Germany is another market where the market is going through a transformation, which is today you have a subsidized scheme called EEG that sets a minimum floor for your power output, if you're a solar plant, for the long term. So you have a market revenue for your solar, but you have a minimum floor. So that guarantees that floor. Again, this model leads to a commoditized approach because all developers will bid into this same auction to get this minimum price. But what has happened over the past 2 years? First, the market price in Germany has been decreasing closer to this floor. So similar to Spain, making the auction much less attractive. And the second thing is the value of the batteries. So again, customers are looking at the value of batteries, and much more batteries are being deployed. So Zelestra, we have a significant portfolio of projects in Germany. We bought a developer called East Energy last year, 2024. And we are now in the process of marketing these projects to customers. So we are marketing in Germany hybrid, similar to what we did in Spain, and we're finding interest from very large customers in this hybrid model. Zelestra will be leading the market in that as well, because that's not common in Germany. And we're marketing standalone large energy storage projects, which are also attractive in Germany and many customers interested in it. So the combination of the different products we can offer between the hybrid, between the tolling, and between the solar is what differentiates us. So I expect Germany is going to go through more or less the same path that Spain and Italy went through.
And then if we cross the Atlantic and we look at the US, another key market. So 2025 for Zelestra, we delivered our first project as part of the partnership that we have there with Meta. There's other projects that we're now taking forward to construction. We signed more contracts. So what's the big driver in the US? So artificial intelligence is obviously a global driver for energy demand, but it seems to be especially a major influence in the US. So has that helped Zelestra in 2025, and will that help us going forward?
Yeah, so we are very positive about the future of the US market, because I think 2025 was a very volatile year with a lot of political measures and uncertainty for investors. But that really was very present and heavy in the first half of the year. The second half of the year, we saw investors really turning around and becoming a lot more positive about the US. And this is because, most of the political noise has subsided or normalized. People think that the measures that were going to be taken were taken already. And then you have the massive explosion of artificial intelligence that is really weighted towards the US. And that is an enormous, completely unprecedented build out of data centers. So this is kind of the buzzword now, and everybody's focused on it. But it's good to stop for a second and take stock of the basics, which is these artificial intelligence models. They need, each training of a model requires tens of thousands of chips, right? So NVIDIA chips, and the data centers are built out of these chips. And if you look at the compute power, it's really an electron moving through metal. So the entire data center operation are electrons moving through metal. So power is the core of the data centers. So when people talk a lot about the constraints that there will exist to build a data center, power is the main one, because the whole data center is power. And the volume of investments that we're seeing are something that people couldn't have imagined before. If you take just the top four between Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft, they're announcing investments, CapEx, for this year in the realm of $90 billion, 90 each. So each of these data centers requires gigawatts of power behind. So what we think is that there will be an enormous acceleration in the build out of energy projects in general in the US. So renewables are a big part of it, because these customers want carbon free, but there will also be nuclear, there will also be gas, because they need to build at whatever they can get. So our view is that this is a 20-year trend. It's a long-term trend that there will be an enormous build out of data centers everywhere that will require all this power behind. And this is really focused on the US.
And I mean, that's part of the driver. I don't know if you felt this as well, but I felt like a kind of sentiment shift last year in 2025. A kind of move away from talking about the benefits of clean energy, of renewable energy. It's more back into the kind of space where people are talking about all energy. And I think data centers might be a driver for that. Some of the geopolitical changes might be a driver for that as well. But if there's a kind of weakening sentiment towards the benefit of clean energy, does that impact a company like us, or what are your feelings? Yeah,
so I think there's been a big shift in the past few years, and I think there's three elements for this. The first one is when the large geopolitical events, crisis started happening, the invasion of Ukraine, people started realizing how much resiliency was important. So I think that was the first light bulb. Countries started thinking, should we really have shut out nuclear when now we really need resiliency and we don't want to be dependent on Russian gas? So the importance of resiliency, I think, started becoming more forefront. Then you had the second layer, which was this AI and data center explosion, where people started realizing how much power would be needed, and that is really a complete step change from where we are today. This portion is important because in the past, let's say 40 years, power load had not been growing in the developed markets, because as the markets grew, developed markets don't grow as fast as developing markets. So let's say 2% a year. The power load would grow by, let's say 1.2% a year. But there's also power efficiency going on that offsets that 1.2 to maybe 0. So the power load had been flat in the US and developed countries for many, many years. So no growth, basically. So all the renewable growth were coming from replacing thermal for renewables. Now, with this data center explosion, now we're in a different world where the overall power load grows by a lot. So that shifted the concept of renewables from sustainability related, meaning you replace coal with renewables, to just add more because you need an overall total that's much, much bigger. And then if you think of the price of renewables in a lot of markets without any subsidies, the cost is lower. It's certainly lower than building a new entire gas plant. It's certainly lower than building another nuclear plant. That's no question about that. So the new volume needs to come from renewables. And then the third thing I would say is, while people were investing and looking at renewables as something that was related to decarbonization, now it's more about electrons. So it's more electrons. Now, the larger customers, these four, they still want to be carbon free. So I think today they're primary electrons, second carbon free, but they still want to be carbon free. So I think the third element of this is that the world has become a little bit more pragmatic. And pragmatically, what is the situation? You need an enormous volume of new power that has to come from whatever we can get. And then if it's carbon free, better. And if it's not, there's a path to decarbonization over the next decades. So we haven't seen really these customers softening their goals, their end target of being zero. They are zero today already. But it's more a matter of being pragmatic and seeing what timelines are needed to make this transformation. This entire context is very positive for Zelestra because, again, Zelestra is about delivering energy solutions at scale, whatever they are. And we have a real focus on creating a better planet for the future, decarbonizing the world. Therefore, all of our solutions are carbon free. But the main driver of growth today for us is really this need for power.
And just to pick up on another point you mentioned there to start, that resiliency. So this is a key word, resiliency, robustness of the grid. In a lot of countries with a high penetration of renewables, there are questions from parts of the industry about how robust grids are. Last year in Spain, we went through, or you experienced as Zelestra, a once in a generation crisis event. So there was a complete blackout. In Spain, there was a black start process to bring the grid back up to full power. What did you learn from that? How did it affect Zelestra? And what are your key takeaways in terms of thinking about grid resiliency in all markets?
Yes. So it's important to understand the causes, what leads to a blackout, right? Because it's not one mistake by one person. It's really a systemic thing. So in an electric system, you have generation sources that are synchronous with the grid and generation sources that are non-synchronous with the grid. What does it mean? The grid is operating at a certain frequency, 60 hertz. And there are machines, turbines, that are rotating and generating at that same frequency. So when there's variations in these frequencies, these machines that are spinning, they can adjust to this variation in the system and keep the system stable. Once you start adding technologies that you don't control this rotation, there's not a real turbine. For solar, you're just injecting electrons. This is non-synchronous. So the electrons that are injected, they're injected no matter what. They're not changing the level based on the frequency of the grid, unless you're curtailing power from the solar project. So a system needs a lot of these synchronous generation, needs a lot of these turbines. And if you start adding a lot of renewables, so wind is similar. If you start adding a lot of these renewables and you don't have enough reserve to manage this volatility of the grid, you will eventually have a blackout because in some moment you will need an enormous amount of new energy to come in to stabilize, and you won't have any. But how have many countries solved that? Through batteries. Because the battery is an enormous energy source that can respond actually in the shortest amount of time. So a battery can respond in 0.2 seconds to this instability. So when there is a frequency issue, the battery responds in 0.2 seconds. So if you have a country with low volume of these turbines, but an enormous volume of batteries, you're going to be fine. If you had gigawatts of batteries in Spain, you will be fine, because these batteries would just stabilize the grid in whatever time is needed. So that's the solution. The solution is more batteries. Now, the countries are going in different speeds in this journey, but this is the solution. And I think this blackout that we had in Spain accelerated things, not only in Spain, because other countries also looked at it and said, well, we don't want that to happen to us, so let's accelerate the batteries. So we saw a lot of movement in terms of accelerating the speeds to which you get permits to put the BESS, simplifying the cases for when you put the BESS in the solar projects, co-located. So several actions being taken to really increase the resiliency of the system. And batteries are carbon free, right? So batteries are the perfect solution because they give you grid resiliency carbon free.
Okay, so a positive outlook, you think, for batteries, and accelerated by that event, hopefully. Then the other technology that we need to talk about as part of our multi-tech solution is wind power. Mm-hmm. It's another technology that's had a difficult few years, especially if you look at offshore wind, and there's been some negative sentiment in offshore wind, and that's potentially trickled down into onshore projects as well. But 2025, huge year for Zelestra. We signed a major wind power contract, our first. We've started construction on our first wind farm in India as well. So how important then is wind for you as part of our multi-tech offering, and where do you see it going in the next few years?
Yes. So I think a lot of the needs of customers can be filled with solar and storage, because you stretch the solar generation from the middle of the day to the peak. But in reality, once you add enormous amount of solar to the grids, you also need power through the night. And you need large volumes of power through the night. So batteries today are not cost competitive to a level of providing 24/7 power. I mean, we can produce that product for customers, but it will be an expensive product. So once a grid gets to this high level of solar penetration, then a little bit of wind power is also required if you want to continue decarbonizing. And the customers, in general, they overweighted solar because it was cheaper. So if you look at these large data centers, they are overweighted solar. So they're hungry for wind. So if you have a wind project that's ready to build, the customer appetite for this energy is enormous, because it is necessary to balance a 24-hour power need. So our strategy is to continue pursuing wind projects. One of our strategic goals this year is to have a larger wind project in construction in one of the US and Europe markets. And the customer need, for me, is what comes behind this. The cost competitiveness of wind against these other sources, and the fact that customers really, really want it.
So super active year for Zelestra in 2025 across all of the markets. So now let's look at 2026. What are your main hopes for Zelestra in 2026? How will the strategy evolve, and what does a good year look like to you?
Yes. So 2026 is a year where we really want to achieve 4 big things. One is on the growth side, which is we have grown tremendously. I mean, we went from a company with 1 gigawatt of projects contracted to 7 gigawatts between 2023 and now. Next year, we want to do another 2.7 gigawatts. So we'll take us close to 10 gigawatts for the whole portfolio. And these 2.7 gigawatts in US and Europe. So we really want US and Europe focus, which is a challenge for us. And here it's cementing the strategic relationships that we already have with these customers, right? We have announced contracts with Meta, with Tesla, with Microsoft, BKW, EDP. It's cementing these strategic relationships that we have with partners, leading to even more growth. So that's the growth side. The second one is execution, because behind this growth, behind signing PPAs, we need to deliver projects on time and on budget. If you look at our entire construction portfolio, all our projects are meeting the target returns that we had expected and the timelines. So this execution is really going flawlessly. We need to continue that. So by the end of 26, we want to have in US and Europe a 2.5 gigawatt a portfolio of projects that are in operations or construction. That puts us as a very big player already in these developed markets. So the second one is execution. The third one is really the continuing the multi-technology journey. So we want to have at least about 3 gigawatt hours of energy storage projects that are starting construction, and probably one major wind project. So that's the third one. And the fourth one is, now that we really made a strategic shift towards US and Europe, we have markets that are incipient, or where our growth is starting, which is Italy and Germany. So for each of these two, 2026 is the year that we want to make them reach scale. Meaning each of these countries has to be a gigawatt level market for Zelestra. And we had structured the company around major executive teams for each of these business units. Each one has a CEO, a CFO, COO to achieve this scale. So for Italy and Germany, that would be the goal for Zelestra next year, to reach this scale. And then at the end of the year, if I could sum up 2025 in one word, it was a year where strategic choices proved to be very successful in execution. The things that we had decided to pursue proved very well in execution. So now we laid this foundation. 2026 will be the year that we deliver on this foundation that we have built and actually ramp up the construction portfolio of Zelestra to really this high level.
And now, so Zelestra's team now globally is around 1,000 people, a bit more than that, I think now. So there's been growth there. So 2025, some word for the Zelestra team in 2025 in terms of what they delivered, and what are you asking people? What are you asking of our team in 2026 to get to where you want to get to?
Yes. We transformed the company very significantly, right, on the people side, because we had a company that had a very good culture, very collaborative culture, in a history of success. We have a 20-year history today, but that was very centralized in Spain. So we had the vast majority of the team in Spain and few people in markets. So markets that we wanted to have enormous growth, like the US, in 2023, we had 4 people. Now we've completely transformed these to these large-scale business units that have a significant local team focused on the growth. So these business units are approximately 100 people per business unit. And then we continue to have the corporate team. This team has delivered these amazing results last year. And this was at the cost of an enormous effort and incredible diligence and grit from people to get to this level. I know from my past that a company delivering 3 gigawatts of PPAs per year is very, very difficult. It's very difficult. And the team was able to do this. It came with an enormous amount of stress to the team. So we could see at the end of the year, the level of stress in the company was very high, which is normal. I mean, a wildly successful team has stress. If you look at any super successful team in history, I like to use sports as references. And if you think of the Chicago Bulls winning 4 NBA titles, they carried a lot of stress. But they were also incredibly proud to be part of a winning team, right? So they're going through an enormous effort that they know leads to great things. And that's what I see in our team. Our team has gone through a lot of stress, but with this very deeply ingrained belief that we're changing the world for the better, that we're creating a planet that's better for our kids, and that we're having a major impact in the world. So that's what we're going to continue in 2026. Now the teams are established. So now we're not in hiring mode anymore. We're more stable towards 2026. And the level of collaboration in the company and the culture needs to be solidified now that all of this is built, right? So I really believe that the culture is what creates long-term success, that you can have short-term success with a bad culture, but for long-term success, you need a great culture. So 2026 is the year where we're in this cultural side, we're really cementing this collaboration element so that the company is resilient from the long term. And also a company that's not dependent on the executives, right? That's not dependent on me, on the executive team, but it has a culture that is more permanent and that can stand the test of time.
So one of Zelestra's strengths is that we are this end-to-end reliable partner. We're a vertically integrated company. So tell me what that looks like, and what is the specific speciality that we have in terms of EPC, in terms of constructing and engineering these projects?
Yes, great question. So one of the key differentiators for Zelestra is that we're actually a engineering, procurement, and construction company. So a lot of developers, they do the project development activity. Some of them are not strong on the customer side, but for the most part, they're not strong on the engineering, procurement, construction side either. They develop the project, meaning getting permits, getting land lease options, etc., up to a point, and then they hire a third-party EPC that will build the project. So that has a lot of downsides related to the Zelestra model. So in the Zelestra model, the engineering, procurement, and construction in a lot of our markets is completely internal. So that means that when you're in the late stage development of a project, the engineering, meaning how this project will be designed, is all being done internally. And that can be optimized because, again, it's our own team. It's not a third party trying to extract margins from you, but it's our own team trying to make the project better. It can be tailored, meaning we change this design back and forth to optimize to what the customer wants and what the restrictions are for that area. And it allows us to do the procurement at scale, meaning if you're doing 3 gigawatts a year, you can go and procure gigawatts at a time. That gives us a big procurement advantage. So we had an RFP in the market for 3 gigawatts of solar out there, and we had one for 3 gigawatt hours of storage. And again, few companies are buying 3 gigawatts at a time. And then the construction side. The construction side, the reason that we also deliver every project on target and on budget is because this team functions extremely well. So a normal developer will contract an EPC, and maybe they'll contract the modules or inverters on the side. We procure every single element in the entire project. So the cables, dozens of different types of cables, the steel, the frames, the inverters, the power equipment, the communications equipment, every single element is done by us. So that team has a deep, deep knowledge and understanding of how to build the solar project and batteries. And we're developing the wind capabilities now, but the team really is deep on solar and batteries. And this team also builds for third parties because we have very large customers in Spain that are strategic partners to us that really believe that the capabilities and the reliability that we have are unique. So we've done mostly repeat deals with the same customers, and that allows us to get even more scale because now we have our own portfolio and we have the portfolio for third parties. So this is really a differentiator for Zelestra, and I think the combination of this EPC with the customer product is really the key. But I'll give you a tangible example. If a customer comes and says, okay, I need a hybrid project this way, with this profile of generation. Okay, you need to go back and redesign the project because maybe you need more batteries, less solar. It's a different project. A normal developer will go to an EPC firm and start getting quotes. So this can take 8 weeks, 12 weeks for an initial quote, and then it's 10% design, 5% design, and then months more to get to an actual final price. So the relationship with the customer is not dynamic. I mean, the customer asks for a price, but you're now going through months of discussions before you can go to a customer. A customer comes to us and asks for a price for a hybrid product, we deliver in a week or two because we have all the capability internally. So that gives us a very fluid way to manage the customer design, the product design process for customers, the combination of the engineering with the customer.
So Zelestra also has a very active digital team. So we're developing a wide suite of products that we are putting into our own facilities to make them more efficient in terms of operation, in terms of designing projects. So tell me about your ambition for Zelestra's digital capability.
Yes, this is another competitive advantage for Zelestra because we really believe that in the future, all companies will be digital companies. This is something that if you think of the tech leaders from the past, they always had this concept, but it wasn't very tangible for everyone. But now I think with the AI models, it's becoming tangible for everyone, how the AI models are advancing so fast that they can replace normal work. At Zelestra, we have an entire digital unit. So this digital unit is led by our Chief Digital Officer, Borja, but it has an entire group of people based in India, led by a top leader we have, Anupama, that is developing digital products. So this team has data scientists and has cutting edge capabilities to develop digital products. So we have a series of different use cases that we're developing to optimize Zelestra and even third parties. Because again, as we sell EPC services and O&M to third parties, we also create products that we can sell externally. So this is a very important differentiator for Zelestra. And the products that they're developing, some of them can really change the industry. I mean, we have some that are around the development process that are, say, mid-stage development, but they have a high potential. If you think of the development process, it's a very manual process, right? You have documents going back and forth, hundreds and hundreds of documents per project, people reading these documents, coming up with conclusions on if the project is good or not, then financial model. This is the best scenario for AI, a situation where there's an enormous amount of data and you need to, out of the complexity, emerge with conclusions, right? So one of the products the team is developing is around that. That's just how development process can be completely digitized and having an agent, basically, that is in the company and accessible to everyone. And there's a series of other products that we're developing that are in the same direction, right? Of leveraging the capabilities that exist today to Zelestra. All that said, I usually like to point out too that I think that in the AI world, if you think of the industries that will be disrupted, all the industries that are based on data or digital work, somebody typing something, they're more disruptable, right? But for Zelestra, we have a big arm of the company that is the actual construction. So in the construction world, where you're moving dirt, where you're taking machines and drilling, etc., this is the least disruptable, right? So in the scale of the industries that are more disrupted, this construction portion of Zelestra is the least disruptable. So I think that incorporating AI in several areas of our business and having a portion of the business that is less disruptable also makes the company more resilient for the future.
If we're to come back here in January 2027, what are the 3 key things that you would like Zelestra to have delivered in 2026?
So I think number 1 would be a leader in US and Europe, which is our focus now. So people see Zelestra with the amount of growth that we have, another 2.7 gigawatts of PPAs, just US and Europe as a leader there. The second one is having established gigawatt level business in Germany and Italy. We have great leaders in these 2 countries to make this happen. And the third one would be the consolidation of this multi-technology journey. Just a large volume of gigawatt hours of energy storage in construction, large wind projects with now the focus in US and Europe. So that would be the dream. And we have a team that is so amazing. In the past 2 years, we have outperformed our goals for the most part. So we set a goal, but we actually reach higher. So I am sure that the next year we're going to come back and we're going to have execution that's beyond the goals as well.
Well, to draw on the sporting world, if you had to give a team talk, a pep talk to your team for this year, what would you tell them?
Wow, that's a difficult one. I think that this year is about maintaining the things that made us successful. So keep doing what we're doing well. Continue to focus on the customer, meaning high level of activity on origination, on designing products, on talking to the customer. So keep going. Enormous focus on execution. We want to have 0 large failures, right? We want to have a company that can fail often and fail small and learn and not have any big failures. That is the model for me for a learning company, a company that can accept and celebrate failures, but small ones, so that you don't have any big one. And then the third thing is the culture, right? That we want to advance our beliefs. We have very well-defined beliefs from how the company wants to be. And we want to have a company that after this consolidation phase is resilient for the long term. Our strategy now is a 2030 strategy. We have defined very clear goals for this 2030 horizon. And the culture of the company is what's going to make it resilient and successful in the longer term.
Leo Moreno, thank you very much for joining us today on this podcast. 2026 is a super major year for Zelestra, but I'm sure we'll all get there, and I'm sure we'll be able to deliver on these targets.
Thank you so much, Paul.